Trade Genius.
Hey guys, how's it going? It's Philip with Trade Genius. Alright, so in yesterday's video you might have seen the rising wedge or the ascending wedge. Wanted to talk about that. So we're just going to go over Bitcoin and current resistance levels that we're going to be running into. So first, this ascending wedge, obviously those are bearish. We've completed the measure move from the descending wedge. We called that out when we broke out over here, said 9,200 was a target, and we hit that in the last 24 hours. So that move is done. We'll get rid of that. And that was a very key move in putting in a bottom down here below 7,000. And now is the next leg up. So the next thing we're going to look for is a break of this lower trend line. Okay, that's going to be key. If that breaks down, again, we measure the moves from the beginning of the wedge. So the measured move down is going to be, let's get that tool up here. So we'll take it from here to here. And if it breaks down, let's grab it here. So anywhere at this point of where it breaks out of this lower trend line, okay, that's where you start the measured move. So that would take us down to 77.66 if it fulfilled that. And that's if it broke there. If it breaks here, then it's looking at like 8,000. So that's the potential for that. That's the technical way of measuring those. Okay, doesn't mean it always will reach those targets. Sometimes they don't. They'll fall short. But that's potentially the area you could see a pullback to. Now, that being said, support and resistance plays a key role in where Bitcoin goes. So I eyeball this level here at approximately 7,800. So that kind of comes into play with the measured move from the ascending wedge. The other level I'm looking at is here at 8,367, and the other level I'm looking at is 87.85. Okay, now the other thing that can happen is this could just break up, and since we're getting so close to the 200-day moving average, and this is a pretty powerful technical level, sometimes that becomes a tractor beam and it'll end up going there. Now, if it does shoot up to that level and it's 98.70 there, then that's going to pretty much break this formation, and we'll have to see how we're looking at that point, because if price was to move up there, for example, then you almost have now a price channel that you're going up and down in. The bullish BTC markets of fourth quarter of last year would continuously break these ascending wedges, and which is a pretty rare thing, since most of the time when you are in an ascending wedge like this, I would say 70% of the time, maybe actually a little more, these things will break down. So anyway, those are the levels that we're kind of eyeballing, but we're really watching this trend line here. As far as our signals go, and you can get these at tradegeniusacademy.com, really powerful on the daily. As you can see, we had one fire here short, and then that basically was from March 11th down to this low down here of almost about a month of just bearish activity signaled here. And before that, we had a long here that was good for a couple pushes higher. But these daily signals are pretty powerful. And then prior to that, they don't fire very often, guys. Prior to that was actually at the top. So I love this thing on the daily, and kind of the way I use it is that kind of dictates my shorter time frame as far as what the overall market sentiment is. So right there at the top, there was a short signal, and that stayed on since that fired back in December 18th. That stayed short all the way till February 15th after this kind of bottom was put in. So that's what I'm looking at here. This is key here. So for this move up, all right, so now if we clear this level, the key here is getting back above this 200-day moving average. At that point, 11,700 is going to be probably the next critical spot. Again, multiple failures there. Getting them back above that would be a huge floor at that point. So resistance turns into support. So that's what we're looking at, guys. I don't see anything on the daily. I don't see any bearish divergences. However, if we drill down to the 4-hour chart, we will see we do have a bit of a bearish divergence here on the RSI. And if you're not familiar with that, you know, basically a bearish divergence is just when your RSI is going down like that. Okay, so the RSI has a higher high here, and it's, you can draw a lower trend line down to it here. Okay, but however, price has made higher highs up here following this trend line. Okay, so that when they're going away from each other like that, that's a bearish divergence. Bearish here. This is bearish because it's going down. So that kind of acts as a leading indicator. So for that to get nullified, Bitcoin would have to have a pretty bullish US session here. It's about 8 a.m. Eastern, and so we'll see how the markets affect that. Speaking of the markets affecting it, if we look at our overlay chart, let me bring that up real quick. So what we have here is an overlay. Basically, we have, this is the S&P futures, and that's this line here. Let me make it thicker for you guys. Okay, so during the day or during the trading week, so you know, Sunday evening through Friday, approximately 4 p.m. It's been pretty noticeable that Bitcoin and the equity markets will kind of move, not always exactly lockstep, but more or less move kind of in the same direction. You'll see it here. You know, this actually dipped here, and Bitcoin didn't really budge, but then moved back up, and so did Bitcoin. But if you were to zoom out, you can see kind of a rough correlation on that. Actually, this week here, the week of the April 16th, over here till April 20th, the market was actually a bit stronger, but still you can see this upward movement, like that goes like that as this thing went up. Then it kind of came back down, kind of met it, and but you can see there's just kind of like this rough correlation. So just keep that in mind during the week, the trading week. There's not an inverse correlation, meaning that if the market's down, Bitcoin's up. We may see that as Bitcoin develops into a flight of safety. That is one key thing I'm looking for. But you have to keep in mind when the markets are open that the equity markets the direction of the equity markets may influence the direction of Bitcoin. Now, these correlations will come in and out of play. So it's just something to keep an eye on. In TradingView, you simply just go to comparison, compare add symbol. For the futures, the S&P futures, you can type in ES1. You have to make sure futures is selected, and then you can select that. So that's how you do that. All right, guys, that's pretty much it. But pretty good setup for Bitcoin. I think the bottom, as far as the bottoming formation goes, have a bit of an inverted head and shoulders here, and the neckline broke nicely. This move here would measure out to about here, so be interesting to see if we can get a break above this 200-day moving average. That's the next key. This is the final chart I wanted to show you, and this is our trajectory fork. So using the pitchfork tool, we're just trying to map a trajectory for this current bull run. This one takes us to, if we stay in the median range, that would take us to roughly about 100,000 at the end of the year. You have to look big picture about Bitcoin and how it moves. Typically, when we've seen these moves before, you're going to get these big moves like this up. And what happens is this thing here will look like what happened back, you know, at a different time period, like down over here. Okay, they just don't look very big in the big scheme of things as this thing moves higher and higher, and the moves get more exponentially larger. So just keep that in mind too. Big picture. So we've broken this trend line, this log. This is on a logarithmic chart, guys. Broken this trend line here, and a pullback again. A pullback to that trend line would not be out of the question. That would be at around 81.24 as well. So, but notice we're pressing up against this other trend line, which is kind of held this this bottom here for a long time. This trend line from back in March of 2017 that has held all the way till here, was broken here March 27th last month, and now it's being tested from the underside, and we're pressing right up against it right now. So that's about 93.54 here, and then the 200-day moving average. So bit of congestion here for the price to break through. So I don't expect a complete break, like, you know, as far as once we get above here, there's not a lot that I see in the way of resistance before we test this all important 11,700 level. So, but very curious, very interesting to see what will happen here. Again, we have that ascending wedge that we really have to keep an eye on. So if you're long, we were in a trade from the breakout of the descending wedge in the room that finished up really nicely. So we're out of that trade, kind of waiting for the next move on Bitcoin. But if you are long here, I would suggest trailing stops below the daily candles or even below the 4-hour candles. But I wouldn't get a stop up in the wedge. I'd be trailing it below the wedge. If this does break out and up into the 200-day moving average, that'd probably be a good spot to take profit and wait for a pullback, and then wait for the move there after that happens. And then we can go over that at a later time. But that's pretty much it, guys. I think clearing the 200-day moving averages puts 11,700 on the table. So trade accordingly. There's your levels. And I think, again, this 200-day moving average is probably going to act as a tractor beam. Price will hit it. Price will probably pull back initially. The good thing about that is this ascending wedge would be broken. But if not, keep your stops trailed up here. Breaking this will bring in 11,700, and that's the read. So that's we could see all of that happen this week. Bitcoin's got some nice momentum, nice volatility. So we could see these types of moves certainly within a week. Bitcoin's certainly capable of doing that. All right, guys, thanks for watching. Please hit like and subscribe, and we'll see you on the next video. Take care. Bye.
Trade Genius.